There's never a shortage of TV on DVD releases, and this month is no different. We have a little something from everyone, including all the different studios, and a little something for everyone. We're going to start, however, with Merlin, the complete first season. Of course, if you've been reading my reviews or my editorials for any length of time, you probably know what a huge fan I am of BBC television. So, of course, Merlin is not going to come as a surprise to anyone when I tell you how much I enjoyed it. Now, it's interesting, this show's kind of had a strange journey here in the U.S. It actually got played on NBC for a while, got some nice fan following, and then was canceled because it was low rated, as is everything on NBC. Then it moved over to Sci-Fi, one of NBC's sister companies, and did fairly well there, but I don't know if it's enough. They haven't announced yet if they're coming back for the third season, even though it's been renewed in the UK for a third season. Of course, it's a really good show. It is the story of a young Merlin, and of course there's some comparisons to Harry Potter in that respect of the young wizard, the teenage wizard, but since this show takes place in medieval times and not in current times, it really does have a different flavor and a different flair from Harry Potter. Of course, making things even better is the presence of Anthony Stewart Head, who most people remember as Giles from Buffy the Vampire Slayer, as the king, Uther Pendragon. And while the show doesn't get too bogged down in the Arthurian legend, it does have a nice amount of kind of tribute to that sort of storyline and the whole Camelot plot, so that if you're a fan of that, you'll enjoy the show, and even if you're not, you can enjoy the show as well. It's a fun fun show that, even though it suffers a little bit from some weaker special effects, which is kind of a hallmark of BBC shows, it makes up for it in terms of its writing and its charm. Included on this multi-disc DVD set are a number of extra features, including a commentary, a making of, some production video diaries, and a photo gallery. So definitely worth checking out if you like wizards and sorcery and Camelot and Arthurian legend and all of that good stuff. Next up, we have Daria, the complete animated series, which actually collects all 5 series of MTV's odd spin-off show from, of all things, Beavis and Butthead. Now, Daria is very different from Beavis and Butthead, although it does share some humor. It really does kind of veer into a smarter direction, as Daria, of course, was sort of an outcast for being so intelligent. What's interesting about the show is that as you watch it over the seasons, it really does kind of progress somewhat. It always stays a sort of a half-silly animated series with a lot of humor to it, but really it does, as the show gets about halfway through its run and further on, it really actually started to develop sort of a dramatic tendency and storylines that would sort of carry through from one episode to the next. I can't say it's my favorite show in the world or that I love it. I can say it is kind of interesting to watch going back and looking at it now. If you liked the show, you will probably still enjoy it, and if you didn't like the show, I don't know that it's going to change how you feel about it now, although I certainly think I have more of an appreciation for it now than I did at the time when it came out and I was actually in high school. Looking back on it now, I can appreciate the satire a little bit more. Purist fans should be aware the original music, which was all trendy popular music of the day, has been replaced with generic songs. For licensing reasons, the set would have been too expensive to produce otherwise, but really, if you're a fan of the show, I think you'll be pleased just to have it on DVD. Lionsgate brings us 3 TV on DVD releases this month. We get Dirt, the complete second season, Raising the Bar, the second season, and According to Jim, season 2. So we get a whole bunch of season 2s from Lionsgate, all of which have their pluses and minuses. More minuses in some cases than pluses. According to Jim is a show that critics love to pick on, and I think most people in general like to pick on as just being a dumb sitcom. And it is. But it at least is a mildly amusing dumb sitcom. I don't love According to Jim. It's not a show I ever watch regularly, but watching it on DVD, I can say it can be funny at times. It's a very typical, not complicated family sitcom, and it does make me laugh from time to time. What can I say? I'm apparently a simple guy. You do get a couple extra features on that one as well, including commentaries and all new interviews with the cast, so that's a plus if you happen to be a fan of the show. With Raising the Bar, the second season, even though this is a Stephen Bochco show, I have to admit I'm not a terribly big fan of it. Thank God that Mark Paul Gosselaar cut his hair, at least. That is something. But I just find this show kind of goes into that area that I don't really care for, where they tend to make their characters more unlikable than likable, and that's a big pet peeve of mine. For the most part, I watch this show and I kind of go, I don't really like any of these people. Why would I want to continue to watch them practice law week after week? Now, if you love law shows, there is some novelty to be found here, some creative ways of winning cases and things like that, and some decent character drama that you can get wrapped up in. But for me, without a really strong base of characters, I just can't get into it. So this is one that I can't say that I love. Then we have Dirt, the second season of Dirt, which is also its final season, which starred Courtney Cox on FX and was not really a big hit because it only lasted 2 seasons, which is unfortunate because Dirt is actually a really interesting show, portraying Courtney Cox as this sort of love her or hate her tabloid editor who basically was kind of the scourge of Hollywood. And what's interesting is that where Raising the Bar fails to make the characters likable, Dirt takes this unlikable character and makes her likable, and makes her human, makes her flawed. And I found that not only was Courtney Cox's performances very good, but the show as a whole is very compelling, very interesting, and very different from anything else that's on TV. So I'm a little disappointed that it didn't last longer. This DVD set really just gives you the episodes, unlike the first set, which had some extra features. But for those of you who like the show, like myself, it's nice to get it on DVD and at least be able to kind of finish out the run if you didn't see it while it was on television. Next up, we have Haunted, starring Matthew Fox. Yes, between Party of Five and Lost, Matthew Fox starred on a show which was basically like The Sixth Sense, the TV show. Fox plays a detective who sees dead people who helps him solve crimes. The problem with the show is it's awfully dark. When your lead character is basically kind of sort of responsible for the kidnapping of his own son, and that is what drives him, it's really depressing. And it's a dark show, and there's really not any sense of fun to it. And, you know, if you're going to deal with scary horror stuff like ghosts anyway, to make it then on top of that really serious and dark and dreary, well, I'm sure there are people out there who can appreciate it, but unfortunately I am not one of them. So I'm going to say that Haunted really didn't live up to what I hoped could be kind of a neat little find on DVD. Speaking of horror, we also have Tales from the Dark Side, the third season, George Romero's old TV show, which was sort of a horror anthology. And it played out very much kind of like the Friday the 13th TV show. Every episode was a half-hour anthology episode of some sort of horror, and we have everything from demon babies to possessed radios to magic shoes and ghosts and goblins and ghouls and things that go bump in the night and a little bit of everything in between. Unfortunately, it hasn't aged all that well. The show is a little bit creaky nowadays, and it certainly isn't particularly scary. But if you're a fan of the show and if you enjoyed seeing it back in the day, then this is a nice nostalgia trip. And there's a few recognizable guest stars as well. I won't spoil who they all are, but there's a few faces you'll recognize, especially from 80s television throughout the set. Finally, we have The Facts of Life, the complete 4th season, and The Fresh Prince of Bel-Air, the complete 5th season. These are both sitcoms that I used to love and enjoy when they were on TV. The Facts of Life when I was a kid, and The Fresh Prince when I was a teenager. And so these were nice nostalgia trips for me, even if neither of them quite holds up as much as I remember them. But The Fresh Prince of Bel-Air actually still holds up as being a pretty funny show. And for the most part, what you get in these two season sets are what you got for the previous collected 7 season sets. You get more of Natalie, Joe, Blair, Tootie, and Mrs. B in The Facts of Life doing what they do, which is kind of existing at an all-girls school and letting wacky hijinks ensue. And The Fresh Prince is pretty much more of, you know, Will Smith and Carlton and Hillary doing their thing in Bel-Air. But each of these seasons was notable for some reasons. In The Facts of Life, Blair and Joe went off to college, which sort of changed the dynamic of the show a little bit. And in The Fresh Prince, Will finds love, actually, and finds himself engaged and standing at the altar. So that was sort of a change for the show as well. For the most part, they stayed true to their sitcom roots. Not much changes from episode to episode. Not any storylines really don't continue through. But you know, they're fun. They're sitcoms. They're half-hour bits of fun that you can pop in and really get a laugh or two out of. And the Facts of Life doesn't hold up quite as well as The Fresh Prince does, but it certainly still has a nice nostalgia factor to it. Now, The Fresh Prince, as usual, has no extra features, but The Facts of Life does include the 2-hour Facts of Life movie that premiered before the 4th season, in which the cast goes to Paris. And this was something they used to do a lot more of back in the 80s than they do now, but it was kind of a neat event, and I remember it happening, actually, so it was very fun to be able to go back and revisit that, and it was nice that it was included in the set and not one of those things that will just be lost forever once the season sets have been collected and there's nothing new left to collect.